Today we're going to continue with finding the area of a circle, and let's just briefly review the steps. So step one is decide which formula, and we're just going to focus right now this week on our formula for an area. So we're going to use A equals pi, and then this r squared we're going to separate into r times r. That's what r squared means. Next, it says we have to decide whether we need a radius or diameter. Well, in this formula, we're always going to use the radius. However, to keep our skills strong, we're going to show in each problem what the radius is and what the diameter is. But we're going to choose radius always when we're working with the area formula. And so this is going to lead us into our next lesson. There's 3 different ways that we can use pi. And we focused yesterday on substituting 3.14 for pi. So we replaced this pi symbol with a number 3.14. So we're going to now go back over how you work with finding the exact answer, which means that pi symbol just stays in the math. And then we're also going to use the pi key on the calculator. So our goal is to get everything done in class today since we have access to the calculators. So now please go back to the chart on page 22. If you were here in class yesterday, we should have both of these columns filled out. So we're now going to start with the exact answer, which means it's also called pi form in terms of pi. And we're going to use these 2 circles. This one gives us a radius, shows us a radius. This one shows us the diameter. And if you recall what we did yesterday, we went ahead and we wrote what they gave us, the radius. And then we also reminded ourselves if we wanted to find the diameter, we would take 2 times 7 to get 14. But again, our focus is going to be on the radius because the formula that we're going to use is area equals pi times r times r. So that's always step 1, is showing that we know the formula we're supposed to use. And now we're going to fill in the radius. So the second step, this is also known as substitution. And so that should be area equals pi. Remember, we have to leave the symbol in the math. Pi times 7 times 7. We'd rather use the parentheses instead of the multiplication dots. So we're going to then continue, and I want you to now focus in on the 2 what's called rational numbers, numbers that don't go on forever, and that would be the 7 times the 7. So we're going to just drop down pi, we're going to leave it for a minute, and 7 times 7 would be 49. So in math, we prefer to see regular rational numbers first, and then symbols in back. So we're just going to scoot 49 in front. We're going to scoot the pi symbol in back. And so the answer is 49 pi. And we just put them next to each other, kind of like if we wrote, if I had the variable a times 4, we'd prefer to write it as 4a. We always like to use the number first. And then this means centimeters squared. Now let's talk about this answer. This was not that difficult to get. We really had to just multiply the radius times radius. So quite frankly, it's the easiest one to do. However, the answer, for lack of better words, is not very satisfying. My brain is not registering what 49 pi centimeters square means. Today when we did this, we had 153 and 8,600 squares. So I know what 153, I can imagine on 153 squares, but I have trouble imagining what 49 pi squares would look like. However, this is the answer that we're trying to find. So now let's go to the other circle. In this case, they gave us the diameter, which is 12 centimeters. Yet in this formula, we can't use the diameter, we need the radius. So just so you recall, the radius is half of the diameter. So 12 divided by 2 would be 6 centimeters. So we're going to use the 6. We're going to start our process again. Area equals pi times r times r. Now comes the step where we substitute for the radius. So area equals pi times This time it's 6 times 6. And we're going to focus in on just 6 times 6. So area, third step, is area equals pi times 6 times 6 is 36. And once again, we prefer to write the 36 first and the pi last. And so if you want to go directly to that, if you understand that the end result is going to be the radius times the radius, the product, which is 36 in this case, and then the pi symbol, you can just jump from here to here if you're comfortable with it. And again, this would be centimeters squared. And I think I put a meter up there. So here's the great news when we go to work with the pi key. These first two steps are going to be exactly the same. So I would start out exactly the same if I was working with the exact answer of the pi key. The second step would also be exactly the same, so I'm not going to have you write it again. And then this next step, we're just going to use the calculator, because once we get 49 times pi, we're going to actually use the calculator key and take either pi times 49 or 49 times pi. So please pause and do that on your calculator, and then write down all of the digits that you see on the calculator. All right, and hopefully this is the answer that you have. And you're going to notice that I brought back the approximation or approximately symbol as well as dots. This continues on and on. The pi key can only give us so many digits depending on how many digits the screen of our calculator will hold. And so it's still not exact. This is the only exact answer because when we use the pi symbol, it represents all the digits of pi. So this might look somewhat similar. If you recall what our answer was when we used 3.14, and you probably have it on your paper, it was 153 and 86 hundredths. And this one is just a little bit bigger, 153 and 93804 continuing. So the answers are similar, but when we use the pi key, because there's more decimal digits, this is 3.14, but pi key uses more digits after the 14, so it makes sense this would be a little bit bigger, but they're very similar. And so this answer, unless they told us to round, we'd leave this answer, and then we would put centimeters squared. So this would be the answer. Now, most of the time, they're going to tell us to round to the nearest whole number. In this case, that'd be 153, and this 9 would tell it to go up to 4, so 154. If they ask us to round to the nearest tenth, this 3 would tell it to stay, so it'd be 153 and 9/10. If they ask us to round to the nearest hundredth, this 8 would tell this 3 to go up, so it would be 153 and 94 hundredths, etc. They were going to tell us usually where to round, but for right now, since it didn't say round, we're going to leave the answer as is. So let's try that again. And then I'm going to ask you to try. We will have exactly the same step using the pi key. We're going to start with a formula. Our second step will be exactly the same. We would substitute 6 where the radius is because we're using this circle. First, we would have had to figure out the radius. And now we're going to put what we see here in the calculator, either pi times 36 or 36 times pi. The result will be the same. So please pause and write down all the digits you see once you do that. And this should look somewhat similar to what you see in the column with 3.14 using that instead. So again, this answer continues. We're using this as approximately. And because I didn't give us permission to round, we would leave it. However, we are going to go ahead right now and let's round to the nearest hundredth. Let's say that they told us we can round to the nearest hundredth. And so that would look like this. If we haven't, since we haven't rounded, let's try that. We would say what for the whole number, dot for the decimal, the heck. So that means whole number, dot, tenth, and hundredth. And we would underline those digits and then cut the number off there. Then we would look at the digit, the bossy digit, the number right behind where we cut the number off, and this 7 would tell this 9 to round up. So it would be 113 and 10 hundredths centimeters squared. Now let's compare that to the answer that we had using 3.14. When we use 3.14, the answer is 113 and 4 hundredths. So if I compare 4 hundredths and 10 hundredths, we notice that this is bigger. And that would make sense again, since we're using many more digits behind the 1, 4. 3.14 continues when we press the pi key. When we did that in class yesterday, you notice that after 3.14, you noticed a lot more digits. So let's go ahead now and turn to the homework paper. All right, so we're going to start, and we're going to look at this first one. Asks us to find the exact area. So this is the one where we leave the pi key in the symbol. The easiest way to go is to do this direction. However, we're also going to end up having an answer that doesn't have a lot of meaning to our brain. So let's start with the form. Oh, before we start, I have a radius. Yay, I'm going to use the radius, but I also want to tell them what the diameter is. So the diameter is twice the radius. So 2 times 6 would be 12 meters. And ironically, we just did a problem very similar. The measurement was just different. So we're going to write the formula. Area equals pi times r times r. And then our next step is to substitute where the r is. We're going to fill in pi, and the r is 6. So 6 times 6, and we just got done doing this exact same problem. That would be area equals 36. Remember, we're just working with these numbers, pi. And we're done, except we have to put meters squared. That's labeling the units of measure. That's the answer we're after, leaving the pi symbol in the math. Let's try the next example. We're going to start. They give us the diameter, but we can't use it. We need the radius. And if you recall, the radius is half the diameter. So I need to take 6 and divide it by 2. And so the radius in this case is 3. So we're going to write our formula. Area equals pi times r times r. Pause anytime you need more time to write. Then we're going to write area equals pi times 3 times 3. And so we're going to focus on the 3 times 3, which would be 9. And we're just going to scoot this pi symbol to the end. The unit of measure is centimeters squared. And once again, we're done. So this is, again, the easiest. You're going to continue 3 and 4 on your own. But I'd like you to fast forward or move to the last page where we start working with the pi key. So often, we're not directed to find the exact answer, or we're not told we can substitute 3.14 for pi. In this case, our next option is to use the pi key on the calculator. This gives us a more accurate approximation of area because more digits of pi are used to calculate the area. However, this approximation has many decimal numbers in the answer, and for this reason, we're usually, but not always, asked to round to a certain place value. So for today, we're going to round our answers to the nearest tenth. That's the first placement after the decimal. So we're starting again with a circle. They are giving us the radius, and we're going to take that radius times 2 to get the diameter. But the good news is we just want the radius. So we're going to start with our formula. Area equals pi times r times r. We're going to fill in the radius. We're leaving pi symbol right now, and we're going to fill in radius with 3 and the radius with 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. So we're going to take pi times 9 in our calculator. So please pause, use your calculator, and write all those digits. All right, so now that we have all those digits, recall that they want us to round to the nearest tenth. So we're going to use what dot the whole number decimal tenth. So 28.2, we're going to chop it off. But the bossy number tells us 2, and we only look at the number behind. That bossy 7, it's 5 or more, so it raises the score. So our final answer is the area is approximately 28 3/10, and the unit of measure was centimeters squared. So I'd like you to go ahead and do the rest of these on your own. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.